Ever wondered if you could survive one of history's most famous sieges? Journey with us through the gates of Troy, where we'll uncover survival secrets, military tactics, and daily challenges that tested human endurance for an incredible decade. Let's dive into one of history's most famous love stories that might not be about love at all. While poets romanticized Helen and Paris's relationship, historical evidence suggests something far more complex. Think about it. Helen wasn't just any noble woman. She was essentially ancient Greece's most valuable political asset. Her marriage to Menelaus cemented crucial alliances, and her abduction by Paris wasn't just a tale of passion gone wild. Some scholars suggest it was actually a calculated political move by Troy to challenge Greek influence in the Aegean Sea. Paris might have been less Romeo and more shrewd politician, using Helen as a pawn in a larger power play. The face that launched 1,000 ships might really have been the excuse that launched a major political conflict. Pretty sneaky, right? So, what was it actually like living inside Troy during this massive siege? Picture this, a city of around 10,000 people, all crammed behind those famous walls. The Trojans weren't just sitting around waiting for the Greeks to break in. They had to keep an entire society running. They had clever water management systems, including wells and cisterns that collected rainwater, ensuring they wouldn't die of thirst. Food was carefully rationed, with grains stored in massive underground pits that archaeologists have actually found. Markets still operated, children still played, and religious ceremonies continued. But life wasn't easy. Imagine the stress of constant military alerts, the challenge of feeding thousands of people from limited farmland, and the psychological toll of seeing enemy campfires every night for a decade. The Trojans even maintained trade through secret tunnels and midnight naval runs, proving they were incredibly resourceful under pressure. Let's talk about the mind games that made ancient sieges truly terrifying. Picture yourself inside Troy, where every day was a psychological battle. The Greeks weren't just attacking the walls, they were masters of mental warfare. They'd parade captured Trojan allies in front of the walls, stage mock retreats to lure defenders out, and even catapult the heads of executed prisoners into the city. But the Trojans fought back with their own psychological tactics. They'd host loud festivals during Greek religious holidays to demoralize the attackers, and their women would appear on the walls taunting the Greek soldiers. The constant sound of war machines, the smell of decay, and the uncertainty of rescue all played havoc with defenders' minds. Archaeological evidence shows increased religious offerings during this period, suggesting just how desperate people became for divine intervention. Now let's explore the impressive arsenal that made Troy such a tough nut to crack. The city's defenses weren't just about those massive walls, though at 20 feet thick and 30 feet high, they were pretty incredible. The Trojans had an array of sophisticated weapons like the gastrophetes, an early crossbow that could pierce bronze armor from 300 feet away. They used something called Greek fire, an ancient form of napalm that would keep burning even in water. The city's architecture itself was a weapon, with clever features like offset gates that forced attackers to expose their unshielded right sides. What's fascinating is that they also developed an early warning system using bronze shields to reflect sunlight, allowing them to communicate across the city instantly. Even their famous Scaean Gate was a deadly trap, designed with a sharp turn that would bunch up attackers into perfect targets for archers above. Ever wonder how Troy kept thousands of people fed during a decade-long siege? Their survival strategy was nothing short of brilliant. The city had massive underground grain silos, some as deep as 3-story buildings, that archaeologists have discovered were carefully waterproofed with clay. These weren't just storage spaces, they were engineering marvels that kept food fresh for years using natural cooling and ventilation. The Trojans also maintained secret gardens between their famous double walls, growing vegetables and herbs year-round. They even raised livestock on the city's upper terraces, using animal waste for fertilizer in a surprisingly modern closed-loop system. But their real genius showed in water management. They built an intricate network of cisterns that could capture enough rainwater to support the entire population, even during the driest summers. talk about ancient ingenuity. Let's tackle one of the deadliest, yet least discussed aspects of the Trojan War: disease and medicine. In the cramped conditions behind Troy's walls, illness could spread like wildfire. The Trojans developed fascinating solutions, using herbs like thyme and oregano as natural antibiotics and honey for wound treatment. They created isolation areas for the sick, a practice way ahead of its time. Archaeological evidence shows they burned specific herbs daily, which we now know had antimicrobial properties. But despite these measures, diseases like dysentery and typhoid were constant threats. The Greeks faced similar challenges in their camps, leading to a strange kind of biological warfare. They'd sometimes catapult diseased animal carcasses over the walls, hoping to spread illness among the defenders. It's a grim reminder that in ancient warfare, microscopic enemies often claimed more lives than swords and spears. Let's explore where you might have found yourself in Troy's complex social ladder during the siege. At the top, you'd find King Priam and his family, living in relative luxury despite the war. Below them were the military commanders and priests, who gained more influence as the siege dragged on. The merchant class became surprisingly powerful. Those who could smuggle goods through the Greek blockade became incredibly wealthy. Skilled craftsmen, especially weapons makers and engineers, saw their status rise dramatically. But life was toughest for the common folk, who made up about 80% of Troy's population. They did the grueling work of maintaining defenses, worked as porters, and often gave up their food stores for the military. Interestingly, some slaves actually moved up the social ladder during the siege, earning freedom by serving as spies or soldiers. The whole crisis created a unique siege society where traditional social rules bent under pressure. The spiritual side of the Trojan War was just as intense as the fighting itself. Inside Troy's walls, temples buzzed with activity as people sought divine protection. Fascinating archaeological evidence shows a huge spike in religious offerings during the siege. We're talking everything from tiny clay figures to valuable gold jewelry. The Trojans had a clever system where priests would interpret omens daily, using things like bird flights and weather patterns to boost morale. They'd perform elaborate rituals to Apollo, their main patron god, often on the city's highest point where the Greeks could see them. These ceremonies weren't just about faith. They were powerful psychological tools that helped people cope with the stress of siege life. Even the famous Palladium, a sacred statue of Athena, became a symbol of Troy's survival, with soldiers touching it for luck before battle. Let's tackle the most famous military trick in history, the Trojan horse. Here's what most people don't realize. The Trojans weren't complete fools for accepting it. After 10 grueling years of siege, they had actually repelled numerous Greek deception attempts. The horse itself was a brilliantly calculated psychological weapon. It played directly into Troy's religious and cultural beliefs. Horses were sacred to them, and the sheer size of the offering made it seem like a genuine gesture of defeat. Archaeological evidence suggests that Troy's gates were indeed wide enough to admit such a structure, though they had to partially dismantle their walls, a detail often overlooked in retellings. The Greeks cleverly exploited both Trojan pride and their desperate desire for the siege to end. Even the timing was perfect, coinciding with a major religious festival when the Trojans would have been more inclined to accept divine offerings. Let's explore your survival odds during Troy's final hours. The city actually had several secret escape routes. Recent archaeological findings reveal a network of tunnels beneath the walls, some leading to hidden coastal coves. Smart citizens who noticed warning signs, like the Greeks burning their own camps, had about a 60% chance of survival if they used these passages. The northwestern postern gate, rarely mentioned in epic poems, saved hundreds of lives as a key escape point. But here's the catch. You needed to know the right people to access these routes. Wealthy merchants had ships ready at hidden docks, while common folk often had to rely on desperate last-minute escapes. Archaeological evidence shows that those who fled early through the tunnel system had the highest survival rates, while those who waited for the final assault faced much grimmer odds. Thanks for joining our journey through the incredible siege of Troy. History isn't just about dates, It's about real people facing impossible odds. If you enjoyed uncovering these ancient secrets, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Let's explore more historical mysteries together.